Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition, and today we're going to talk about closing out realities too soon and the mayhem that ensues. What happens when we close out a reality too soon? Well, this is going to piggyback on a video I did maybe last week about closing out a reality, closed out energetically, yet it doesn't have the physical marker our human wanted. So this is kind of going to be a flip to that video, where our human tries to close out a reality physically and it's not energetically done. And what happens when we try to do that? Now, one thing to remember here is one thing our human consciousness does not like to do is to feel anything. So when it gets upset, when it gets angry, when we're getting into any emotions, shame, blame, guilt, anger, our human likes to cut and run. And that's just what our human consciousness wants to do. Or lash out, but still cut and run after we lash out. We're not ones to button up a reality. It's not our go-to. It's not what we do. And when you start moving into higher states of consciousness, it takes a while to get to that place where you can close out a reality from a place of peace and happiness, and not because of an emotion of anger and fear and blame and shame and all those other things. The trick here is to never close out a reality when you're pissed or feeling anything that's not complete happiness and gratitude for the reality and knowing it's time to move on. Because when you can do that, then it's energetically done. But when we try to close out a reality because we're pissed off, we leave a job because we get pissed, we want to break up with someone because we're mad. And you kind of can see this play out. Sometimes it's easier to see it play out in different situations when it's not you. Like what can happen when we try to close out something out of any emotion that's just not complete bliss in a sense, on some level, even if the other person we're closing out with isn't feeling that. We might understand that that person might not be happy with what we're doing, but we know it's energetically done because we don't have any emotion around it anymore. And we know it's time for it to move on from it. Now, you have to be at a certain place with your consciousness to be able to do that. That's something we kind of learn over time, the more we embody in our higher aspects to be able to do that. When we're in our human realities, and even when we start transitioning over to our higher consciousness realities, we want to close things out because we don't like the way they feel. We don't like the fact they're bringing up shame and blame and guilt and anger and sadness and grief. We don't want to feel that stuff. So we just want to close out the reality. We don't want to feel that stuff anymore. We want to be done with it. So we try to close out the reality early. And what will happen is you just keep rebooting it over and over and over again. Now, I think I've done a couple of videos on something similar to this. This is kind of a different way to look at it. Because we're trying to close out a reality physically and it's not energetically done. So all we do is create either we keep dragging out the reality we're in because we want it physically done, but it's not energetically done yet. And we when we get into a different level of consciousness, you can close out a physical reality, but energetically it has to leave your field. So that's a little bit different than what I'm talking about right now. But we do have to go through that process when something physically ends to let it exit our field. We kind of have to recalibrate, and that can take 2 months, 2 weeks, 3 or 4 months before energetically we can work through the rest of it ourselves, but we consciously know that's what's happening. And normally that's when we can try to end it, but it still kind of doesn't end yet. So it's kind of the same thing, I guess. But when you're in your human consciousness, that was just our go-to. And you'll still see yourself doing it. I'll still do it. I'll try to close something out physically, but energetically, it's still lingering. It might not be as severe, but it's still there. And I still have to go through it and have to go through it and have to go through it because I'm trying to close it out when I'm upset, when I feel bad about it, and not bad about closing out, but bad about the whole reality, because another thing to remember, your soul is never going to make you feel guilt, shame, blame, anger. That's our human stuff coming up. Your soul's never going to make you feel that way. So when when you're getting those emotions, those are your human emotions, just to identify that. My soul's not making me feel bad about this. But if we have a lot of stuff going on, we haven't resolved it all yet. That's why it's not energetically done. We haven't resolved it all yet. We still need the experience to get to the rest of it because we haven't been able to do it on our own. So you can say, okay, I want to close it out. I'm done with it, but there's still more there. So it'll linger on, linger on. You repeat it maybe with a whole different group of people, a whole different situation. You know, a lot of people will play this out in job scenarios where they get pissed, they leave a job, and they get into another job, and the whole thing goes sideways over there too. And they get pissed and they do it again. And it keeps going the same way because they get pissed and they don't want to see the reality out. So they want to end it before they get to kind of the sweet spot in the reality where it's energetically finished and you can leave it with peace. So if you're not closing out a reality in a blissful, peaceful, happy place that, okay, this is done now. I don't need to keep having this experience. I might not know what comes next, but I have to believe there's something else. And I have just gratitude and love for the people who are in this reality with me, no matter how rough it might have been. It doesn't mean the other person might not be happy about it. Usually they're not. Sometimes they don't care. That's how you know kind of when it's energetically done. It just falls apart so easily in a sense. It just buttons up easy. You might have thought, oh, it's going to be so hard to get out of this reality. I used to think that about all my realities. Oh, it's going to drag on. That's our human trying to make us feel really important in a lot of ways. Like, oh, they'll never make it without me. This reality will drag on forever. And then it's energetically finished. And like that, these people are gone. And you don't see them or hear from them again. And they could have been in your life for 15 years. And all of a sudden, they are gone because it's energetically finished. But our human's going to try to physically finish it when we start getting into our stuff, which is the whole point we're having the situation to begin with, because we're trying to get into our stuff. That's why we have every situation, so we can get into our stuff. So there's a purpose to it. Even in higher consciousness, we still have situations that are working through our stuff. Even once you ascend your body to higher consciousness realities, you're still working through your stuff. You know, people who are in that beginning phases of consciousness and they're really in that ooey gooey floaty phase, they haven't gotten to where they're trying to realign everything and make sure everything is aligned and keeping everything aligned and getting into situations to clear out some of your stuff and your programming and all the ugly stuff we don't really want to look at. So just be aware of where reality is, and you have to really look at it and see. And if your human's pushing to close it out and you're crying and you're upset, anytime I'm crying and upset, and I tried to do that a couple weeks ago to close something out, and I'm crying, I'm so upset, and 5 days later, I'm still feeling so upset about the whole thing, and I'm like, I can't, here it is, and now I'm going to have to do it again, because now there's a point to me going through that. It's just I'm going through it a harder way, in a sense. I'm clearing out all that emotion, so in a sense, I'm getting closer to an energetic close by doing it. But I've tried to close this thing out like 4 times. And every time I try to do it, I'm in there can be a lot of fear around it. There can be just a lot of, you're just so dragged in through the reality in a sense. You thought it would be a different reality. You didn't want the reality to be this way. And normally that's kind of the hinge pin of all those realities. You get into something and I didn't want it to be this way. You know, I didn't want this reality, even though this might be the highest aligned one. And it's working through a lot of different stuff for me, and I can see all the reasons I'm here. And in my case, I could see all the reasons I'm there. Maybe not in the beginning, but as it's dragged on, I could see all the reasons I'm there. And I'm still like, I just want it done. You know, so much I just want it done because it hurts so bad every time I have to go through it. But you can't close it out while you still got all that stuff around it. So look at really what's going on with you with anything you do want to end and see, why do I want to end it? Do I want to end it because this is uncomfortable? Do I want to end it because I don't like how this makes me feel? Do I want to end it because the person's being disrespectful? That's a kind of a different thing we have to look at. Are they being disrespectful? Am I compromising on a soul level to be in this? Because usually when we're in that energy, we're in something that it's aligned in a sense, it's clearing out something, but it's not aligned the higher we're going to go in our consciousness. And most of these things aren't. Most of these situations do pass, even though we feel like we're never going to be out of them. They do pass. This too shall pass. They all do at some point, and I've had some that dragged on for a long time, but eventually they did have this ending to it, and everyone could move on to the next stages. But just look at the energy you're in, and if you're not in happiness and bliss and gratitude over that reality, but for everything you have, your whole body feels that way, get your body to that place. Get your body to that place. And it might be, you might not be able to get your body to that place unless you keep going through that reality. See what you fear about that reality. What's your biggest fear about staying in it? What's your biggest fear about the outcome there? Look at the body resistance you have over the whole thing and really look at how you feel about it, because that is going to tell you whether you're physically finished or if it's energetically finished. When it's energetically finished, you will know. It'll fade out so fast, you will not. I'm not going to say you won't care, because sometimes we do still have some grief over it, even though it's energetically finished. But there's just this sense of freedom with it being done. And sometimes it can take time. I don't like using linear time, but I'm going to use it here because our vibration has to get it all out of our system. So I could have tried to end something physically back in November. For me, I tried to end something physically back in November, and I thought it would be done. And January came around and okay, here I am again in the same thing all over again. But I'm going through it faster because I've kind of set up the reality now where I'm spinning through it a little bit quicker. So I'm burning off quicker. Instead of having to go through this every 3 months, I'm going through it monthly now to kind of burn off more and burn off more of the whole thing. But you have to get to the place where you're in gratitude about what you're doing, why it's ending. And then you know you're energetically finished. When you really just don't, you get to the point where you don't care. And not a don't care from a I don't care human place, but you're like, even if the worst comes and this thing ends, it's not really going to be the worst. You know, fear is like a house of cards. It's not going to hurt me when it falls on top of me. Even if it falls on top of me, it ain't the worst thing in the world. It's just not. Our human builds all this up to be so terrible. And that's kind of what can keep spinning us in the reality, but that's what we're trying to burn off. So there's a reason you've gone through it. There's a reason why trying to end these things too early doesn't work. I mean, I always use the example where, I can remember being in relationships and just one little thing goes wrong and the whole reality just I would see it as one little thing was amiss and the whole thing collapsed because energetically it was finished. And then I look at other people and you could see couples where someone would burn down their house and they're still together. And I'm like, how does that happen? Over here, one little thing would happen and the whole thing fell apart. Over there, they're still going through it because energetically, that one's not finished. Energetically, this one's finished. If energetically something's finished, freaking wind blows and it'll collapse it. You know, it's nothing holding it up anymore. The energetics is what holds that reality together. It's not the physical stuff. The energetics creates the physical stuff, but the physical doesn't hold anything together. That's why you can't end anything when you're not energetically, it's not done. You just got to keep mugging through it again and again and again and again until you can resolve it all inside. And we really don't have that capability till we get to a certain space in our consciousness where we can see it. And even when I'm trying to end something physically 6 months ago, I didn't understand why I couldn't. I kept just asking, can we just end this? Can we just end this? Can we move on to the next thing? Whatever that is. But when I look back on that 6 months ago, I wasn't in the place to end it. I was not in a place to end it. And sometimes we also have to look at the other people's side of the reality. Why someone else is in the reality with us? What are they getting out of it? What are they clearing? You know, just because I'm not comfortable and they're not comfortable, ain't nobody comfortable in this reality in our human sense. No one's really enjoying this right now. And everyone's getting pushed to their brink in this reality. There's still a point of, well, but they're not done yet. They're not pushed hard enough yet. And you're not pushed hard enough yet. And there's a reason everyone's clearing to go through it. And sometimes you'll see the subtle shifts of things kind of shifting out. So just look at the subtleties of the shifts. Look at how you feel about it. And don't rush to close something out that energetically you know is not done. It's just going to, I don't want to say make it worse down the road, but in a way it will, because you get so frustrated at the end because it's not done. Then you just kind of get to this place where you're like, okay, you know, whatever. Let the chips fall where they may. And if that's how it ends, that's how the shit ends up, that's how the shit ends up. So, but it's never going to end up that terrible or terrible at all. It's always going to end up highest aligned. It's just our human wants to put the badness on it in a sense. I really don't like good and bad, but it wants to paint it the worst place to keep us kind of in that whole thing. So look at where you are with it. Be honest with yourself. Can I really close this out or do I? And you might just have to go do internal work with yourself for a while. It might not even be talking to the other people for weeks at a time. You might have to just keep working on it internally, until you say, okay, can I now close this out? Am I at peace with this now? Can I bring it to the table and not just kind of slink away from the reality like our human also wants to do? Can I sit here, close it out, and everyone feel good about it? Or everyone feel, maybe good's not the word, because if you're dealing with a human who doesn't want it to close out, they're not going to feel good about it. But can you see their side of it, of what they were getting out of it? Can you see if there's a role here for you anymore? What's going on really? We have to look deeper at all these things. We can't just rush to the first thing. Okay. Keep practicing the art of intuition.